So I guess I want to share with you something that maybe you're not aware of, I don't know, but I want to then turn it back to the panel here. So you may or not be aware, but Haudenosaunee people are the last remaining Aboriginal governmental form that pre-existed the United States, pre-existed the colonial process. There aren't any others. And in certain areas of the Confederacy on their territories is the last remaining sachamship titles, clan elder titles, and that process is still going on, right? It's the last one. Everyone else, in some form or another, has adopted a Western electoral system. And until somebody tells me differently, I'm going to keep saying, I've been saying it for over 10 years, and no one's been able to share that that's not true. Why is that?
Because we're strong-headed. You know, the interesting thing that I wanted to add to the first question was that we live in a society that's a paternal order, where you take on your father's last name or your husband's last name, so we're a property of. But in the Haudenosaunee world, you take your mother's clan. The status of who you are rests in, and your political voice rests in who your mother is, not your father, and that's understood, and there's no argument about that. And so what becomes really important is that matriarchal power that rests in a cooperative society that works together. I love what Matilda Jocelyn Gage said. Never was civilization.
Never was justice
more perfect and civilization higher. Basically, the suffering women seen for themselves a society that could not be better, you know, and so, and they wanted that because they never seen that before. That's all.
So why is that? That's the question, huh? That's a good question. Well, you know, I don't know if I have the answer to it, but I have a little story though that, you know, you never realize sometimes growing up what you have, right? You go out into the world and you discover and explore, and you know, we as Haudenosaunee people, we're not perfect. Although you talk to some of us. But yeah, so growing up, I mean, when I say that we're not perfect, meaning that, you know, we have conflict, you know, we have, you know, the same challenges as all human beings do, and through times in our history, whether it was a message that was given to our people and how we organized ourselves and how we governed ourselves, really brought this really beautiful system that you all participate in today. And I think that there's something really powerful in that. And so there's so much that's being said tonight about what story is told and who's telling the story. And it's so interesting that the founding fathers of the United States were so moved and influenced by our people that they modeled the U.S. Constitution after our system. And why is that story not told? Why? So for our young ones who are here in the audience, this might be the first time you've heard something like that, right? And for some of you, not so young, right? And we're in our, you know, beautiful years here of living on this planet. I don't know, maybe this might be the first time you've heard that too, I'm not sure. But it's not common knowledge, and that's a problem, right? So you ask, why is it that we still exist with this traditional government, right? And, well, you're participating in it today. But there's pieces of it and that history that have been omitted deliberately. And I also do believe that there are historians and academics who are directly responsible for omitting that history and have to take responsibility for it. And so you'll begin to understand more clearly why we still exist in the way that we do when that history is told. Because then the pieces that have been omitted become clearer, right? Because within our governing structure, it's our clan mothers, like Mama Bear, and all of the women, all of her sister clan mothers, who really are the ones that really have the ultimate say within our governance. But that didn't get translated over into US governance. Right? So there's pieces that have been missing. Every time we meet and we have a meeting, we get together and we start with an opening address. And we give thanks for all elements of life, from the people, to the earth, to the waters, to everything living, all the way up to the sky and the stars. And thanking all of creation, and we bring all of our minds together as one before we start any meeting. And that's what the Founding Fathers saw, and we're very influenced by that. And in that is also understandings of compassion and love and forgiveness. So imagine if we as human beings, or human beings even in this country, every time we came together for a meeting just like this one, we all started out with acknowledging each other's existence and presence, and the presence of the waters that flow outside. And we talked about bringing our minds together as one, and that made we meet in a good mind with love and compassion. And I think right now in today's world, what we're experiencing is a huge lack of love and compassion and understanding and forgiveness. And we're all worried about our rights. Nobody's thinking about their responsibilities. What's your responsibility to the water? What's your responsibility to the trees and the air and the future generations, right? So when you start to think that way and find that you're in relationship to the world, it makes a huge difference. So that's why I think we have this longevity, because we're also looking to generations far ahead of us who were never going to be on this planet together in human form. Right? So I think that has a lot to do with it.
Sounds good.
Okay. Yeah. I like that. Thank you, Michelle. That's really good. So in the film, there's a very small discussion about in the 19th century, some communities, some Haudenosaunee communities, adopted that form of government, the electoral system. And at that moment, this grand tradition, this tested and functioning tradition in some communities was entirely erased. And so, do you think that the communities and the people are still suffering from those decisions today? And if that's true, if there's an imbalance, like how do you get it back?
One thing I know, at least from Akwesasne, I don't think we chose the electoral system. It was imposed at gunpoint, you know, and it was government both on the Canadian and American side, because our community straddles the international imaginary boundary line of the United States and Canada, and New York State, and Quebec and Ontario. So to me, the system was not one. Yeah, you can hear me, huh? I don't even think I need a mic, do I? I think it's set up like a Greek Colosseum or something. I just throw an echo, huh?
It's a little soft.
Oh, okay. I mean, I can turn it up.
I think that mic is a little lower.
I don't think it's on.
Yeah, I don't.
It's just lower, but maybe the battery. It's on.
Pass.
Oh, yeah.
All right. What was the question?
I was talking about, I was basically trying to understand, like, do you think that the electoral systems which were imposed, and I used the wrong term, in some Haudenosaunee communities we're still feeling the effects of that? And like, if that is so, like, how is it that you can return balance?
Well, I think we have to arrive at some point where there has to be some kind of acknowledgement of traditional systems and its necessity to the genuine identity of the people, and to recognize that the imposed systems were put in there so that the government could deal with us, because they couldn't deal with us on a traditional term or the way that we were, and so they put in puppet governments, right, so that they could deal with it. And you know, just like U.S., it's a quick turnover. Like, you're always electing your new chiefs by the traditional system. Like me, I'm a third generation grandmother, so I'm going on 20 years in my position. I don't get reelected. I gotta die before somebody else takes my place. So by having that kind of leadership, you get consistency. You get the history to live on, and you know, there's a carry forward. There's not this when one goes out, you undo the work that the one before you did, and then you create all these new laws. I know, it's just kind of different, huh? And so for me, it's about the continuity and the longevity of who we are.
I think it also helps if you educate the youth on what happened in history. Because I think a lot of times the youth will just say, oh, that's the tribe, or that's the Mohawk Council, or not even know that those were imposed governments, or know exactly what the traditional government is.
Wait, I want to add something to that. I think what's really important is, you know, with the recognition of the strength of women in Haudenosaunee societies, under our law, under our understanding, is that women own the land. So the first thing that the white governments attacked was the women. And if they could put the hearts of the women on the ground, then they conquered that nation. And so they did everything they could to unravel that kind of maternal order. And it did a good job, but it didn't do it well enough, because I'm still sitting here. So I just want to, you know, say that what's important is that something really old still exists, and it certainly has a bearing in truth. And we understood war. You know, like Michelle said, we're not perfect, and we did bloodletting, and we were pretty rough on each other. But we're also people who found our way to peace, and I think that's the bigger story.
When 30 years ago, when I started to work with Peter at Konnón again, and I met a lot of really amazing people that were educated us and me really about what it is I'm really talking about, you know. And we heard this story from Corbett Sundown, who was the Hawk Clan chief at Tonawanda. And he said and he'd been a chief nearly his entire life, you know. He said that when they invited him to the longhouse, when the women invited him to the longhouse, that's when they asked him, or told him, really, that he's going to take on the responsibility as a Wiyane. And he said if he had known then at the time, looking back all those many decades, the amount of responsibility that he, you know, really needed to carry on, he might not have walked in those doors. And since then, it's kind of been made clear to me that Haudenosaunee traditional leadership is not a system where people, campaign for. You don't go out on campaign. In fact, if you were someone who really was desirous of that kind of leadership and that kind of responsibility, you probably would be the last person ever selected by your clan mother to be in that position. And so Louise is my family's clan mother, my wife, my kids, and and so I want to know what do you think about that story? Can you connect to it, or is it intriguing?
I can connect to that. My father's a lawyer, and so this is a position that he took, and I see him. He works all day, and then he comes home and he has people at his house all the time talking about, can you fix this? Can you go to Cayuga? So he's always has to have his ear open, and they talk about a chief and how they carry themselves and how their skin is supposed to be 7 layers thick, and that's more about having compassion and love for the people, because that's why they select them. So he really has a lot of patience to listen to different people and to do all that work and to do it at first hand and responsibility. I know it's very, very heavy on their shoulders, and same for their grandmothers. So they really do, it's like a life's work once they take on that title. And they know that they have not only the responsibility of their clan, but also the other side of the house, because he's Wolf Clan and we're Bear Clan. So he looks across the house also when he's making decisions at us. So it's not like, he has the love for everybody.
Yeah, that's pretty cool because it creates the balance, right? Because, your wife is Bear Clan, and the father gets to sit across from his children so that he can watch their behavior and correct them when they get home. But anyways, it's a pretty cool system. It kind of diverts any kind of self-agenda, because, you can't just look at your own clan. You got to look at the clan of your children and make sure that you're accountable and responsible to all of them. And you're right, a man campaigning to be elected as a leader is the wrong leader. Sorry to say. I'm watching U.S. politics, and it's funny. It's funny to me because that's not real leadership when you stand there and call down another person. To me, that's just kindergarten stuff. But when a clan mother, when a woman puts a man in leadership that has substance, and then you don't look for the man who's all being show off. You look for the quiet man at the end of the room who's minding his own business, and he's quiet. He knows how to listen to the people, and that's the kind of man that, and he don't boast about himself and how great he is. He's humble, he's kind, and that's a leader.
No. Okay.